Amanda Nunes came out and says she's thinking about retiring. And her reasoning was very hard to argue against. Here's what she said. She goes, I had a bunch of goals. I achieved them all. I guess I'm done here. Well, that's a really hard one to stop and then argue against because she most certainly has, right? And her career is not the same, by the way, if she did not cross paths with Chris Cyborg. That's the one that kind of left no more out there for the imagination, nothing left to want. I mean, it all comes down to perception. Whenever you're talking about somebody's legacy, it's all just argued amongst perception. Do you perceive LeBron to be better than Jordan? By example. But you're largely left with those arguments and debates because it's very few times that athletes will ever get to actually cross paths with one another. So you're just left to fight it out. But those myths and those fights, as insane as they may be, discussing the different possible integers as to why Batman can beat Superman, is still what keeps the talk alive. And that's largely talk and myth, and what could have been is what a legacy is. And if people tend to favor you, then that myth builds. And that grows into be something bigger than reality. I think we're seeing that even in the short term, as you discuss Bruce Lee, who never fought anybody. But boy, that myth and that belief system is real. And that's not an attempt to take a shot at Bruce Lee. It's just an attempt to use somebody whose name you would know to prove the point that perception is so important. And you really had three. You really have had three. You had Ronda, you had Holly Holm, and you had Cyborg. And I mean, that was murderer's row when it came to the women's division. They all have one thing in common. They all lost to Amanda. It's one of these things, but I'm not sure if she hadn't crossed paths with Cyborg that she would be in the spot that she was in, because that always would have been there, just to take you back. Now, you're armed with the fact that that was a 61-second fight, and there wasn't a whole lot of competition there. You're armed with that, but to take you back before that, Cyborg went off as a 2-1 favorite. So that perception was very much real. I will tell you, I had Cyborg as the favorite. I thought Cyborg was going to win, or just be the winner, just to offer for you an example that we didn't know. And had we not been confronted with that reality, it'd be a very tough spot. Now, I use that to pad the argument that Amanda's making, that she had a lot of things that she wanted to do and she's already done them. True. That's very true. But it also looks as though Amanda is in search of why. Why am I doing this? I used to have my answer. It was about breaking into the big show. It was about making a living. It was about climbing the ranks. It was about getting to a main event. It was about becoming a champion. Once she did all of those, she then had to search and find new reasons to be motivated. So then this champ thing came about, right? Thank Conor McGregor for that, but it became a real thing. So she went after the champ thing, and she knocked that one down. I mean, look, I've never seen anybody in her position of success. I just haven't seen it. Where she is fighting nothing but champions and number one contenders. Oh, and by the way, you get to double the field of who you can choose from, because she'll do it and is doing it at 2 different weight classes. Is there anything more that could be asked of her? And then when you have the people that are trying to figure out who could offer her resistance, who could offer her a struggle, what's the closest match we can do? Everybody comes to the same unanimous conclusion, which is the bullet. The people that come to that are correct. What they're ignoring is the fact that they fought twice and Amanda won both of those fights. And the only reason I offer that for you, I also have never seen anybody in a position of Amanda where the argument and the pundits and the fellow locker room is saying, if we had a choice to who we should see her go against, it's going to be a girl from a different division who she's already beaten not once but twice. I mean, it's very rare. It's very rare that you have somebody that is this dominant, but you're still left with the same question. And that is Amanda's question, which is, why am I doing this? I would offer perhaps Amanda needs to understand that having a gap between yourself and the field is also the dream. It's not just climbing the mountain. It's being at the top and staying there for a meaningful period of time. There is nothing wrong with Amanda taking her throne at the top and just enjoying being the queen. If she could run that 5 more years, which by the looks of things, a pretty reasonable guess, if she could run that for however long she could run that, good for you. But Amanda's been paving ways since she started. The women, Miesha Tate, 50% of that gets credit, headlined UFC 200, the two biggest shows in the history of the sport are UFC 100 and 200. She headlined 200. That's paving of the way. She did the champ thing. That's paving of the way. She defended both championships. That is paving of the way. These are things that have never been done before. So in terms of her following the blueprint, hey, Amanda, you've never followed the blueprint. You're the architect at this point. So if you're coming to us to give you an answer of what your motivation should be, Amanda, there's only one you. We don't give you cues, young lady. You give us the cues. And I don't know what that motivation would be. You're going to have to seek it out, but I do know getting to the top is a lonely spot, but you got one hell of a view up there. And if you have the opportunity to stay there for 5 years, girl, you've earned it. You got the opportunity to stay there for 5 more months. You've earned it. And I will share with you guys one example that I have of somebody else that was just so wildly successful they couldn't even be touched. It's the greatest wrestler to ever live. Amateur wrestling story for you, but that man's name is John Smith. John Smith won 6 titles in a row. Those are world championships and Olympic games. Every 4 years, they call the worlds the Olympic game. It's the same tournament, but you got to beat every man on earth to get the gold medal. He did it 6 times straight. And he walked away. And the next worlds came, and the next worlds came, and the next Olympics. Everybody knew this guy could win all the hardware still. And somebody finally pulled him aside and said, John, you could still win the Olympics. You could still make the team. You could still do all these things. And he says, oh, yeah, I know. And they said, well, why don't you do it? And he said, well, it's not winning the Olympics. It's the work that it takes. I don't want to do the work that it takes. I know what it takes as a multiple-time champion. I know those early mornings, hard afternoons, and late nights. I know the training. I know the eating, sleeping. I know that grind. I did it. I earned my keep, but I don't want to do it. That's the part I don't want to do anymore. And I have a feeling perhaps that's what Amanda really means. I don't think that Amanda has anything hard walking out there when they call her name, putting her mouthpiece in and getting the spotlight in front of the world, getting a big paycheck and adding a belt to the mantle. I don't think that's what the hard part is. I think that she does look at the grind, though, the day in and the day out. This is advice that no coach is going to want her to hear and that she certainly isn't going to take. And though my idea is not fully formed, it's a little clumsy, I am on top of something here, which is, Amanda, listen, do less. There is a gap between you and the field. Do a little bit less. If you're training 6 days a week right now, let's just knock one of those days off. It's now 5. If you're only taking Sunday off, now also take Wednesday. Go hard Monday, Tuesday, have a break right in the middle of the week. Go back in on Thursday, Friday, get your sparring on Saturday, take Sunday off again. 2 on, 3 off. I mean, it's a very common model to refresh yourself. And I will tell you, we're all seeing her perform, and we're all seeing that's not all that difficult for her. We're seeing her take the foot off the gas out of sportsmanship and respect to her opponent. I don't think we've ever seen that in the history of MMA. I think we've ever seen somebody so dominant that they're now lessening, oh, and by the way, not losing a round. We've seen athletes throw rounds away. We've seen them boxing and MMA all the time. That's called strategy. That's called there's 3 rounds. I'm clearly ahead by 2. Let's just run this one out. Yeah, you're going to win this one. Go ahead. We've never seen anybody lessen their output in a round and still win it. That's a challenge, guys. Set me straight. You ever seen that? You ever see somebody trying less in MMA? By the way, still winning the rounds? Girl hasn't lost a round since I don't know when. This is against world champions and number 1 contenders exclusively over 2 different weight classes. It's a very rare thing. But at some point, that grind does get to you. I would argue for you in many ways the entire reason that Alexander Gustafsson retired, which by no means should have he, in terms of physicality. Gus is ever bit as good now as Gus ever was, and he's amongst the best to have done it. But the grind was pretty tough. He was only main eventing fights, only championship or main evented a minute, which means they were 25-minute fights. It's like, hey, Gus, before we go from top contender to out completely, let's slide down the card one notch. Let's try a co-main event. Gus has met me part way there. Gus is now back, but he's doing it heavyweight. Relevance being new guys, fresh outlook, no weight cut. Okay, great. We're saying the same thing, though. We're finding a way to make the burden of the grind less. You can only grind for so long. Even the sharpest knife and the best tool that you've got in the entire shop can only grind for so long, and then there's nothing left. That whole push, that's a really great rah. But when you're the one do it, you will grind yourself down. Overtraining becomes a very real thing. You can do it over the course of a day, over the course of a week, over the course of a career. At some point, you've got to lighten up. And it comes and goes. But in this sport, it's harder to find those valleys. We know when to peak, that's fight up, but it's hard to find those valleys because there's no season. The other sports have a very clear season. They're going to come play hard for 4 months and train a little bit here and get some rest over there. It's all mapped out for you. In this sport, of always be ready, so you never have to get ready, is a very real thing. But it's also why the window is so short. Rests are very important. Breaks are very important. But where do you find them? Where do you find them when you're Amanda? And every girl out there from 11 years old on up who dreams to do this has a picture of you on their wall. And some of you are aspiring to be you, and some of them are aspiring to bring you down. When do you rest then? It's very hard, guys. I don't have all of these answers. I will just share with you, we should not be surprised that Amanda, who as great as she is at this sport, is just a human being. She's just a human being that would like to enjoy her life and enjoy her time and enjoy her family, which is growing, by the way. She's not doing anything wrong here. But we do need to remind Amanda, she has never followed anybody else's rules. She has never been held down or held back for any reason. She has busted through that glass ceiling on the highest of levels right in front of us all. So if Amanda all of a sudden thinks that we're going to be able to hand her the answers, no, excuse me, Amanda. We need you to decide, as you have always done, and then let us know.